So the next presentation today is from Adrian Turner, CEO at Data61. Adrian's presentation is titled A New Model for Innovation. He'll highlight some of the projects that CSIRO's Data61 has delivered for DST, along with our university partners and what the future of innovation looks like. So without further ado, welcome Adrian. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to try and convince you that Australia's #1 priority right now is our national data competitiveness. And I'm going to go into what I mean by that. But I'm going to talk about the implications in an industrial context and a macroeconomic context, and then bring it back to some of the work that we've been doing. So the first thing I want to do is to thank DST for the opportunity to be here and the work that we've been doing together in the partnership, which we value. We value DST's work and the relationship immensely. So if we think about innovation, and innovation's one of those terms, a bit like AI, that it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So from my perspective, innovation is both the combination of the idea, the invention, the idea, but also realising or having impact with the idea or commercialising the idea. It's both of those things. And there's lots of different types of innovation, and we tend to focus a lot on invention innovation. So an example of that is the transistor. And you think about all of the derivative economic value that was created by the transistor and derivative industries. The transistor was a general purpose technology. But what we also see increasingly is innovation around business models, redefining of value chains, but we also see combinatorial innovation. And Apple's probably the exemplar for that. Apple didn't invent any of the components that went into the iPhone. They didn't invent the network, they didn't invent storage, but they put it all together into an integrated solution. And now they're the first company to track through $1 trillion of market capitalization and just generating an enormous amount of cash, which I'll come back to, which has implications for the rest of the R&D community. What we're seeing, if we fast forward now, is we think another general purpose technology emerging, which is machine learning in all its forms. So we think about computer vision, natural language processing. We think about the application to things like robotics. And what we see is the ability to, at scale, do pattern recognition in ways that we couldn't do before, and also automated decision-making or decision support, including risk quantification in domains that we couldn't before. So what we see happening is, as we instrument the world, so connected equipment, the environment, we're going to see increasingly the use of algorithms and automated decision-making, and that's driving new economics in industry that has implications back for the sort of work that we're talking about here. So as a result of proliferation of data, algorithms, machine learning, the emergence of new economics that are often referred to as platform economics, what we're seeing now is a shift and even a geopolitical implications with that shift in terms of the balance of economic power and influence around companies and industry. And we see now 7 of the 10 global companies by size or market capitalization being these platform companies. We see the US having been very good at picking the market and investing in these emerging categories, and the aggregate of the top 5 US tech companies now being $3.4 trillion. But the reason this matters is not the economic value per se, it's that these industry ventures are generating a lot of cash that they're reinvesting in R&D, but they're also sucking up talent globally that's creating a scarcity in some of these key areas. So just the top 5 global tech companies globally right now spend $75 billion US a year on R&D. And if we put that in contrast, Australia's R&D spend as a country is about 20.7 billion. Amazon alone is about that. So what we're seeing for the first time is innovation that previously, when we've had these general purpose technologies and breakthroughs in innovations, they've been seeded by government and seeded through defence spend in a lot of cases. But what we're seeing now is a lot of the innovation actually being driven by industry, and the centre of that focus shifting to industry, which has implications. If we recognise that data-driven industries are driving economic growth, and economic growth is important too because it influences a country's ability to invest in areas like defence. 11% of OECD countries' GDP now comes from digital-related innovation, and that's growing. And if we put that in the context of where Australia's at economically right now, we've got a need to grow. And a lot of the growth, a lot of the new economic growth is coming from digital and data-related innovation. So that says, as Australia, if we're going to continue to have the quality of life, the security, all the things that we enjoy today, we're going to have to grow and we're going to have to be good at creating these new digital-related innovations. So what you're looking at here is gross national income, Australia's gross national income. And what you see is in the 1990s, you see the growth, which really came about from economic reforms in the Hawke-Keating era. What you see in the 2000s is growth coming from terms of trade or commodities exports as a country. And what we see now is that neither productivity gains nor terms of trade growth is going to continue to drive the economy. We've got a gap that we need to fill, and we believe the only way we can fill that gap is by seeding and creating new industry. And that industry will be fundamentally digital or data-based at some level. What you're looking at now is some work that Alpha Beta, an econometrics firm, has done with us. And we're going to be releasing this in the next weeks. But it looks at Australia and how do we rank relative to OECD countries around digital innovation across 4 dimensions. And there's 4 ways that an economy can benefit from digital innovation. One is the productivity improvement, so we're able to streamline and automate things. The second is the investment in digital capital, so this is know-how as well as capital infrastructure and investment. The third is the growth of domestic industries, and the fourth is growth of digital exports. So this is creating new industries that we take to the world. And just thinking to the last presentation, the Navy presentation, talking about the need, increasingly the need for Australia to build domestic or indigenous capabilities to have an edge. This also becomes important, this DNA, this ability for the country to develop new deep science and technology-based industry that ultimately can become globally exportable. The percentage points here are how we stack up relative to OECD peers. So what it's saying is that we're at 74% of parity to our OECD peers in our ability to drive productivity-based digital innovation. We're only 20% of our OECD peers in terms of our ability to generate new to the world innovation, digital-based innovation. And we think that's a fundamental problem for the future of the country. And part of our role we see is to help address that. And I'm going to talk about how we're addressing that with a new sort of an innovation model nationally that we now have 3 other countries replicating what Data61 is building here in Australia. If we look beyond that and say, well, what are the competitiveness, what are the whole of economy drivers of competitiveness that are needed as we move forward to this kind of data-driven next 10 to 15 years? What we see here, and this is a model that a lot of governments use around the world. It's Michael Porter's work, 1991, and it's looking at competitiveness drivers. And what we see is the ones that have got us to this point are not the ones that are going to drive us forward over the next 10 to 15 years. So whereas in the past it's things like natural resources, local market size and proximity, sophistication of local demand, what it becomes is things like intensity of local competition, use of and application of our deep science and technology, our R&D performance, our ability to have outcomes with our R&D performance, our workforce skills, including digital literacy, and our management quality to be able to take these ideas and translate them. And I'll come back to the stages of translating R&D, where we think we also have a systemic fail in this country that we're working to address. To the skilling piece, because of what I mentioned up front, there's intense competition for strong digital talent. And this is globally. So you feel it, we feel it, and it's only going to increase as these international companies expand into Australia. And you're starting to see it with the likes of Amazon, Google stepping up, companies like Atlassian that are absolutely surgical in the way that they extract talent out of organisations. So the other role that I play is I'm co-chair of AustCyber, the Cybersecurity Growth Network. And we developed a sector competitiveness plan that looked at the skills shortage in the country around cyber. And that's what this is speaking to, that we think that there's a talent shortage in order of magnitude 11,000 people. And the way that we've addressed that is actually engaging vocational training in the TAFE system and convinced the TAFE to adopt the Box Hill curriculum nationally. But skilling and talent is going to be a bottleneck for us and is starting to be. The other challenge we've got is our business expenditure on R&D is low. So the way the Australian R&D system is set up, only about 15% of our national R&D spend is directed, where Australia as a country says we want to invest in these things. CSIRO is an example of that, where CSIRO's investment in R&D is more directed, and some of yours as well. And what we see here is the OECD average is 2.4% of GDP around the world is being spent on R&D in business and industry. Israel spends 3.6%. In Israel, 90% of the R&D spend is also directed. So it's saying we're going to be a world leader in cyber, we're going to be a world leader in precision health. In the US, it's 75% is directed. So why this matters is it plays into the culture as a country to be able to develop our R&D and translate our R&D into new-to-the-world innovations. If we're not investing enough and we're not building that capability, then the economy gets hurt, our GDP drops, our investment in sectors across the economy drops. But also, we think going forward, there's an opportunity to have more porous boundaries through collaborations, particularly with dual-use technologies. And this capability sitting in industry becomes an important part of that. If we quantify that gap, I mentioned there was a gap across 4 dimensions of Australia relative to OECD peers. That translates to $315 billion of GDP opportunity for Australia over the next 10 years. Left unchecked, if we don't close that gap, it's about an $810 billion GDP delta in the next 10 years. So this is what we're very vocal about right now, and you'll hear us be more vocal about, is mobilising the entire country, industry and government, around lifting our digital and data competitiveness to capitalise on the creation of these new industries and close this GDP gap. And what we mean by data competitiveness is we think about data capture and related technologies, so things like sensors. We think about, and cyber physical systems too, so autonomous systems. We think about data management, and that includes things like data sharing across jurisdictional and organisational boundaries. It includes things like privacy-preserving analytics as well, feeding into the next point, which is centered on new techniques for machine learning and analytics. And that includes things like trustworthy analytics and trustworthy machine learning that I'll come back to in a little bit, as well as decisions, so making sure that we've got the right data in front of the right people at the right time. And there's a cognitive science and behavioural economics piece of this as well. How do we use data and how do we use these systems to influence behaviours? One thing that we know for sure is that as we get more organised nationally around some of these core emerging horizontal capabilities for the country and lifting the digital literacy and capability, we're not going to outspend other countries. We can't outspend other countries. So what you're looking at here is a global map of national AI programs announced in the last 18 months. So you've got the UK investing 1.35 billion, the EU 20 billion, Singapore about $100 million. USA's number is, I suspect, way low. China's come out, and what we can figure out, it's about $31 billion being spent. South Korea, $2 billion. These numbers are enormous, right? And the talent that they're fueling and the work, I mean, we've already lost talent overseas to some of these international programs. So what it means for Australia is we have to get very specific about where we think we can build around competitive advantage that we have, or where we think we're going to need Indigenous or sovereign capability in the future. And one of the things that Data61 is doing right now is developing the national AI roadmap and ethics framework for the country. And that's part of the work that we've started into. However, if we look at how we're set up structurally today nationally, we've got some work to do to drive that national coherence in any sort of R&D domain that we want to drive outcomes at scale. So this is a mapping of all of the investments nationally in robotics and autonomous systems. And I asked the team to do it, and I actually said to them, it doesn't matter what segment. Pick cyber security, pick machine learning AI, pick robotics, it probably won't matter. And what comes back is a lot of really interesting research that's subscale, that's not linked up. And I think the Autonomous Systems CRC is a great step towards bringing some scale around that, and we're pleased to be a partner of that. The other thing that we've done is, in the last 3 months, including DST, we've formed what we're calling the Sixth Wave Alliance. So we've got 9 groups together nationally who are working on robotics. And we agreed with 2 hours to spare in the workshop that we needed to make this happen. We needed a national roadmap, and we needed to have more transparency and alignment between the work that we're doing. We have to drive the national outcomes that we need, because we're not big enough to not work in a more integrated way. So that brings us to the Data61 model and how we think we can help address some of this. So we're only 2 years old, but as Data61, we've come together, CSIRO's Digital Productivity Group, as well as National ICT Australia, or NICTA. And what we've done is organised as a network. So in the network, we have a single collaboration agreement with 30 universities. We have about a third of Australia's ICT PhDs under scholarship. We have about 60 collaborative research projects at any time running across the Australian university sector. We team with, and we are an extension to the R&D organisations within companies like Boeing. A lot of the CSIRO-Boeing relationship is increasingly becoming Data61's contributions to that. And we also work with small companies to help them scale up. The other part of this is we work with government, and that's both at the federal and the state level. So we're pleased to work with Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland with multi-year agreements, but we also, at the federal level, we have a valued relationship with DST. We were funded under NISA to do work around Platform for Open Data, which is looking at how to share sensitive data across organisational boundaries and jurisdictions and unlock value in public data sets. We're about 1,100 people, 680 PhDs, including the students, all focused on data science. And we're at a point now where our reputation is building globally and we're recruiting talent. We're back into a recruiting mode, pulling talent from overseas back to Australia to be part of us, which we're able to do because of the scale and the breadth of the projects that we're working on. So as I said, there's 3 other countries now implementing a Data61, and OECD is about to showcase us as global best practice in bridging government, industry and academia. And to give you a sense of the scale, the collaboration contracts versus CSIRO digital productivity when it was standalone versus in the last 2.5 to 3 years, 22x increase in the collaboration contracts that we've put in place, because we can draw on not only our own capability but also the network of talent. At the core of this, we're building a capability directory. This is, you can have a look at this now. It's called Expert Connect. It's got 50,000 researcher profiles in it today, Australian researcher profiles. We've got about 40 real-time data partners that are going to be linking in or are linking in. So you'll be able to go and say, I'm looking for an expert in computer vision for autonomous systems with experience in the mining sector and subterranean activities, and it'll come back and say, here are the 3 or 4 people, and here's if they've worked together. And so we're pulling information from the ARC and other places as well. So this is a utility, and this is not just for Data61 team. We want this to be an entry point into the Australian innovation system for partners as well. Bring it to the DST partnership. So we have a 3-year agreement that came about with, Gareth actually came into the organisation and spent 3 months with us to understand the capability and to meet and talk with people that really worked well, I think, for both organisations. And as a result of that, we've defined 3 work streams: collaborative research projects, PhD program and joint showcase events. So we're running approximately, and I say approximately because the nature of the program is that we constantly revisit and look at attainment and outcomes and redirect where we're spending our energy. But 19 projects also across 11 universities, with actually the majority of the collaborative funds flowing through to the university partners, which is a good thing from our perspective, as well as some events that we've done. I want to touch on a couple of other bodies of work that feed into this. So one area that we're very focused on is adversarial machine learning for cyber-physical systems. So what you're looking at on the right-hand side at the top is, by applying tape on a stop sign, an autonomous system actually interprets it as a speed limit sign. So it's tampering with the physical environment to impact autonomous systems. And here you're seeing, by wearing glasses, you're fooling facial recognition systems, so they think that the people on the top are actually the celebrities on the bottom. So there's this whole new research stream around adversarial machine learning for cyber-physical systems. Also includes injecting noise. So in the bottom right-hand corner, it's a picture of a panda. You inject some noise. The right-hand side, the system misinterprets what it is. Also around data linking. So there's techniques and a research stream we've got around data linking. So differential privacy, synthetic data sets, also linking, data linking, and also the reverse of that, right? How do you protect privacy and relinking? So we've got work going on both sides of that. We're also doing some work as in confidential computing or homeomorphic encryption. We're working with Austrac, where we're able to work with them and tie into banks to look at fraudulent transactions. And this is only possible with new architectures that allow us to take analytics to the banks and perform analytics across encrypted data and not actually get exposed to the underlying data itself. And we see lots of applications for this. As well as in the Modernisation Fund work, we've been funded to develop an investigative analytics platform. So we've taken some core technology, we've built around it, we've further developed it and are making it available back into government, but also into industry, with elements of it being that will be open sourced. So think of like next generation Palantir. So incredibly useful work. And this speaks to also an area that Data61's invested in, which is the know-how and the capability to translate the research. So we not only have 4 research programs, cyber physical systems, machine learning, software and computational systems, and decision sciences. We also have 3 technology programs, and we're about to stand up a 4th. And the difference is a technology program has a technology roadmap and results in production-grade systems that can be used at scale by industry or government. And the last thing I want to mention is we're also being pulled to build global relationships and links right now. We did a Sunrise Industries report for the Indo that was launched at the ASEAN Summit, and we've also done some scenarios modelling work for Vietnam that's actually become the basis of their digital economy strategy that was announced in the last weeks. So we're starting to proactively build relationships in the Indo, which is important for commercialisation pathways, but it also gives important avenues for deep relationships into those countries. So I'm going to pause there. Data61 is an incredible asset for the country. Like you, we're mission-driven, we're here for the country. And the work that we're doing, you know, we're seeing impact and outcomes, and we look forward to continuing that and continuing the collaboration.
Probably have time for one quick question, if anyone has a question. Adrian, will you be floating around Syndicate out here and available for people? Fantastic, okay. Well, thank you very much, Adrian. And as a token of our appreciation for your participation today, please accept this.
Thank you.
If you could all just please...